Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at MS Dynamics World. On this special episode, we are previewing Community Summit 2024 with Joe Christensen, founder of Aqueducts Consulting. Aqueducts is the sponsor of this episode and will also be at booth 1817 at Summit. Joe tells us that he thinks a lot about how Dynamics 365 F&O and AX customers find success in their reporting and data management efforts. He's seen plenty of pain and frustration among customers over the years, and there are plenty of good reasons why, from the technology to project planning to user adoption and organizational change issues. The evolution of Dynamics 365 F&O's data strategy, first with the move to data lake export and now Synapse Link, has given customers an important step up, but it's not enough. Another area Aqueducts focuses on is improving reporting reliability, Joe says. A company's reporting system often reverts to becoming little more than key people and tools rather than a true system designed to deliver reports reliably, regardless of the person or technology employed. And he shares some of his more surprising findings from the consulting world, including what it really means to deliver rapid time to value in reporting projects. All right, I'm here with Joe Christensen of Aqueducts Consulting. Hey, Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Can we maybe just start by having you introduce yourself a bit to our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So I am Joe Christensen with Aqueducts Consulting. The name Aqueducts came from when I used to be a Latin teacher at a prep school. I was the least techish guy there was, and now I'm like, I just live in a tech world that, confuses everybody who isn't in the tech world. So I started out in literature. I wanted to be a professor, but for the past 11 years, I've done Aqueducts here, where I was, completely in the ERP and BI and data world. I did that custom for that whole time. Touched everything, touching AX 2012, 2009, and then F&O. And now we've explicitly focus on data and reporting for F&O and anybody on AX.
All right. So from the humanities to data and a real specialization in data and reporting for F&O and AX. Great. So yeah, we're here really to talk about what's coming up with Community Summit North America and find out more about your plans and your expectations and what you're thinking there. What are you most excited about to be sharing from the Aqueducts Consulting team with attendees at the event?
Well, I mean, on the most, we are all internally here, we're most excited to be sharing this message about data and reporting. I discovered a lot about data and reporting over the past 4 years as we really did a deep dive on what is the most benefit of data and reporting to companies and what is missing in the market. And so the primary thing we see missing in the market on data and reporting is not AI. It is not insights. It's not flash dashboards or any of those things. It's actually reliability. It's the thing that's missing. The thing, if you actually looked at all of the F&O, BI, or reporting projects across the industry, including BC, what you're going to see is lack of reliability. Everybody thinks that reporting is behind the ball. They consider reporting very late in the game, and when they do consider it, they underestimate how long it's going to take. And overall, they don't really connect with this message on reliability. They're more interested in just get the data out and then let's just get the reports out that the business needs. And so it's a miss. And when they go all in on the reporting effort, when they finally realize that, wow, I really need to do this, it's not really reliability that's the focus. It's rather just get the report out in front of the person who needs it. And after we're done, if the person or the team that was involved in the original delivery of those reports leaves, if these people leave, everything leaves with them. The system that they were using leaves with them. So reliability is a big thing. We're solving this with a concept called the Report Factory. And we tried to release this in May as Deep Roots BI. And it just didn't we weren't very clear about what we were going to do with it. So it's, we didn't get a great response out of May in Denver. But in San Antonio, what we're most excited about is releasing this approach that says, hey, let's just get reports out for certain. And so our booth is going to be designed like a factory to drive the point home.
Awesome. Yeah, I love themed booths. That's always fun, and definitely something people can certainly look for. Let me ask you a little follow up. So when you talk about reliability, I think of the idea maybe with reporting that when I open up this report, I expect the same kind of data presentation, the same sort of trusted set of data results coming out of it each time to give me what I need to do the work or to make the decision I'm trying to make. Is that what you mean by reliability?
Yeah, I mean, like, to say it simply, everybody wants to turn the faucet on and have the water come out. Nobody wants to think about the plumbing. Like, that's the business wants to do that. They just want the options. What are my options? And in the BI and data world, there's so much to consider, because plumbing wise, if you don't put the plumbing in right, it actually can't handle the volume of data that we're throwing at it. It can't even actually get the data out.
Okay. Yeah. So it's even reliability in the sense of having a mechanism with which you can build the right reporting that you know that you have a facility or a factory, I guess in this case, to put in place the building blocks and then actually deliver the reports as expected.
Right. And since companies don't do these projects super often, what happens also is that this construction crew, or the plumbing crew, if you wanted to say it like that, they're not used to working together. And so many of these projects, it's like ERP. I mean, company's only going to do this once every, 5 to 10 years. And by the time you touch it again, like on an ERP or BI, like we're reporting, everybody just looks wistfully back, squinting back into the past and like, wait, what did we do? And then somebody stands up and says, I was there. I was there when it happened.
But what we did back then has no relevance to how we're going to approach it with F&O in the cloud, because it's right. I mean, and that's a case where the reporting model really has changed.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, look at all the elements that have changed. When I started AX 2009, 2012, Microsoft was experimenting with sort of a bolt-on approach derisively, you could call it a Frankenstein approach of trying to get SSRS to play nice with the rest of Dynamics. Because when Microsoft acquired that software, they were trying to make it C# .NET compliant. Microsoft was developing enterprise-grade BI, and they wanted it to, play nice with ERP. I believe that desire that they started back then is only now being realized with near real-time update hosted by Microsoft. Microsoft takes care of all that stuff in Synapse Link. And, when it first started out, like with F&O, you had Entity Store, you had BYOD, and then Export to Data Lake came along, and it was the first time you could really sort of export the base tables. And BYOD was all about entities and only export what you need. But Export to Data Lake really started to fulfill on this promise that I think that was, that started back in 2009 and 12. And it's way better because the options that we have now, like Synapse Link, is even better than Export to Data Lake, although it is a crying, howling, pain to go for people who are on Export to Data Lake to go over to Synapse Link. But if you just step back from the jargon for a second, Microsoft is helping you get a near real-time incremental export of your data out to these platforms. And that's what everybody's been hollering about since the beginning, is just give me the change set. I don't have to globally load the whole thing every time because it's choking and it's failing. So we have, honestly, what we're looking at is sort of the fulfillment of the promise of BI since we started. And it was a long time. It was a long way off. I mean, big data had to do this pattern, and Satya basically had to open up this pattern when he came in, when he started open sourcing. This is a pattern that came through like Databricks, through, the Apache world, through open source, and several other big data approaches that just did things differently. Microsoft was focused on big engines, and big data was more like, hey, how about we just have a bunch of text files or CSV? and then parallel process them instead of just bringing out the largest engines in terms of process and SQL database that we could. So this has been a long time coming. I think it's a fulfillment of like a promise that the teams were working on early in Microsoft's history.
All right. Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. And yeah, it's certainly for me too, it's an area where I'm interested to see where it goes next. I think obviously Fabric has a role to play in that future as well. But, like you said, I mean, so much has already changed that it really has made for an interesting story. So I imagine you'll be talking about that story at your booth. You'll be probably welcoming customers to tell you about what their pain points are. You mentioned that sort of factory look, I guess, of your booth. Can you tell me any more about the experiences that people will get when they come visit you?
Yeah. This we were excited about this, and Mady, our creative person, I told her about what I wanted to do, and she's just staring at me. She's like, "You want me to make a factory out of the booth?" The booth usually has like a backdrop or something, but it's usually aspirational. Like, it's usually hiking, somebody down at the bottom at the summit of having climbed a mountain. But I was like, no, more like a factory. So what we're looking at. Our booth, when you walk up to it, there's going to be the way it's currently we're conceiving of it is that we start with the user stories. So there are 3 blurbs, big bubbles, right as you approach the booth, and it's where you are now. It's like I'm ahead of the game, I'm right on time, or I'm behind the ball there. And the factory part of it is to say, well, if you're behind the curve here, if you need immediate like triage help, then we should not do a factory tour out in front and walk you through a large orientation. It's like we need to address like these deficiencies immediately. So visually, what we have is the front of the factory. Like before you even enter it, we're going to do a report factory workshop, and that's telling you how this ought to function. And oddly, it just says there ought to be inputs to the factory and outputs. Inputs would be requirements and prioritization. The outputs should be reports. They should not be opinions or status updates for where we're thinking about the reports which should go. It ought to be finished reports. And if we can't get that to work, we don't have a factory. We don't have an assembly line that produces reports. So very simply, our report factory, that's something you can buy from us. If you need equipment for the factory, that's called Conduit BI. And that just refreshes all your tech, all the robot arms and the conveyor belts and everything that you associate hanging out there, the inventory shelves. That's all going to be Conduit BI, where you refresh the whole floor. And then the report factory proper, just called report factory, that's where we teach you how to run production. And that's if you have an internal team, we teach you how to do it in your internal team. And we can augment there, or we could just show you how. If you want to outsource the whole thing, then great. If you just want to outsource a part of it for a while, that's great too. But we just want this understanding of production and assembly line to be front and center. Like that's what we're after here. The business honestly just wants the output. They want the reports done so they can surface options and then decide given the options. So that's what you can expect to see. It's sort of a left to right progression with the user's concerns, everybody's concerns right in the middle.
All right, excellent. So people who are thinking data will feel right at home and plenty to learn, it sounds like.
Yeah. With data on their mind, they're going to walk up, honestly. Well, this is what I found out, Jason, is that if you start talking about this topic on data to somebody who doesn't know what you're talking about or doesn't operate in that space, I can't imagine a faster way to drive people away at a barbecue than talking about this topic. Both engines come off the plane and you start to take a precipitous dive.
Yeah, it's true. But on the flip side of that is there's tons of really passionate people who do think about this, and there's usually Usually, I would say at least a couple in each, hopefully anyway, in each team that's responsible for running a D365 or just any ERP system out there worth its weight. So finding those people, I'm sure, is quite fun for you.
It's a lot of fun, especially the people who are sort of dialed into it, because that's why we made these things. I took a great big step back, and I had to acknowledge something, that as a custom shop, my incentive was to stay long. And if you really want to, Jason, this is going to be really a racy podcast. This is the true confessions out of the consulting world. Is that the consultants? I know this is a big surprise to everybody. The consultants want to stick around, for as long as you have a need. And I just asked the question very provocatively. I was like, okay, well, what if I did the complete opposite? What if I tried to stay for as short a time as possible? So I wrote stuff that would do that. But the surprise that we got out of the market was that when we did that, we got to this like stopping point about at maximum 6 weeks into the engagement. And then they asked the question, okay, great. Given this, like I have all this value pushed in. I've got the new tech. I've got the how to do it. You've enabled my team to do it. Or now I have bandwidth options to kick it out to you if I don't have the people or the time. And what we found was that now everybody could focus rather on the highest value reports to produce them. And the ROI was easier to state. So I got the opposite effect of trying to push in as much value as possible. I thought that I was going to just be pushed out of, my role there, but in reality, we stayed just as long as we usually stay, but way, way, way more value delivered. And everybody, all the stress was gone, like the concern was gone. The executives could see the progress, et cetera. So we got it was actually the most pleasant surprise we've had.
Yeah, that's really interesting. These things seem counterintuitive, but it's certainly not the first time I've heard that idea, and that's great to hear. Honestly, that you've been able to sort of realize that.
It was a risk. I
Sure.
seriously, I was just telling my wife, and the people who are close to me, I was like, well, I'm going to do this, but I couldn't have done it when I started because I didn't know enough at the time, like to be cogent about what people really needed. So we wrote all the tech and everything, but in writing it, we realized there are a lot of tech options. What's really needed right now would be like the how-to and the whole purpose for why does the reporting department exist, and why does everybody always underestimate it? They always underestimate how much time it's going to take to do the reporting part. And most people, their initial reaction and verbiage and wording is that, well, we're not going to be able, in the budget, we only have this much allotted. And then usually it's just sort of an internal thing. It takes telling the executives and the line of business, well, we only allotted this much, but this is all of that we get for that amount of money and time. And then usually people will come back and say, okay, well, we do have to run the business. So what does it take? And then they'll ask again and repropose and redo the budget. But it was a surprise to us how much it was underestimated, undervalued, and how much they were relying on their key people who knew the business, like to represent everything that was needed in reporting. And man, when you do the new ERP project, you redo a lot of your processes, and you also discover dismally that nobody actually knows completely how the business runs. So reporting usually.
Well, before we wrap up here, I just love some perspective from you on sort of what you advise for people who are coming to an event like Summit and just trying to get the most out of it. Any other advice you would share about the experience, about what else to pay attention to, maybe from the product perspective? Kind of whatever you would suggest.
Yes, this is what I would recommend. When I started doing this, it changed my experience of these conferences. It's something that is the most counterintuitive for recommendation. Before you go, I want you to do an exercise. And right now, I just broke the fourth wall or something. I just started speaking directly to your audience, Jason. So before you go, do this exercise. I want you to think, if you can count to 5 here. I want you to generate and come up with 5 people who are surrounding BI and reporting. That's from the owner to the developer to the technician to the manager or director to your program lead to the line of business worker, whoever those people are who are going to benefit from this. Also the end customer of that your company does, that your company serves. Think about 5 names or roles. Ideally, it's names. So write down the 5 names and then answer this question. How can you surprise those people the most? What can you go in this conference? There's just there's so much information, but if you had to drill in on and focus on something that would surprise those 5 people, first jot down what they're used to getting, and then write what would surprise them the most. And then when you go to the sessions and you're talking to people in the booths and in the partner demonstrations, the demo zone, the after parties and all those, the networking stuff, if you can target those things and put a lens just on that, I think that you'd have a different conference. That's how it worked for me. Then when I was specifically targeting that, I was looking for that, and it changed my experience of it.
All right. Really interesting. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I'm sure that's something that we'll get a couple people to think a little bit differently. So thanks for that. And thanks for being here, Joe. Pleasure to talk to you.
Well, I can't wait to see you guys there. I can't wait to meet up with everybody. So our whole team will be down there, including our offshore people. So we have 2 of my top developers. They're coming from India. So I can't wait to see you guys there. Thanks for doing this, Jason.
My pleasure. Thank you. This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Joe Christensen of Aqueducts Consulting for joining me. You can find out more about Aqueducts Consulting and see their data factory concept at booth 1817 at Community Summit coming up October 13 to 17. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, feel free to send me an email, jason@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.